Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the Achieving DCOI Compliance webinar, sponsored by Nlyte Software. We'd like to thank you for the time you're going to be spending with us. And my name is Mark Gaydos. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Nlyte Software. And today we are very fortunate to have a guest speaker with us, Pete Tseronis, who is the founder and CEO at Dots and Bridges. He was formerly the CTO of Department of Energy. Welcome, Pete. It's great to have you on this webinar today. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks a lot. You bet. Thanks a lot, Mark. I'm pretty excited and fired up, and this is a pretty compelling topic these days inside the Beltway.
Well, we appreciate you bringing your expertise, and we look forward to having you on this webinar. For everyone who have not participated in an Nlyte webinar before, we try and keep them fast-paced. We try and keep them within a 30-minute period from presentation to Q&A, keep it all within 30 minutes. So we tend to move pretty quickly. If you do have any questions, feel free to submit them into the chat box, whether they're for myself or for Pete. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them into the chat box. So today's agenda, we're going to give you a quick introduction to who Nlyte Software is. Then we're going to start digging into it. We'll talk about Federal IT Modernization. We'll talk about specific use cases and what's in it for you. And then we'll talk about things to consider both on sort of the technology side and on sort of the process side. And then we'll open it up for all those questions we've got. As I said, if you have any questions, please submit them into the chat box. We always love to get questions. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So first, a quick overview of who Nlyte Software is. We provide solutions really that help organizations reduce costs, save time, and really help their organizations become more agile by managing the complexity around their physical computing infrastructure, whether that is in data centers or it's in co-location facilities or managed service facilities. We help people manage physical elements within their computing infrastructure. The company's been in business since 2004. We have offices in Silicon Valley, New Jersey, London, Asia, and it's a privately held organization. We are identified by many of the analyst organizations as one of the leaders in what is called the DCIM space, which is Data Center Infrastructure Management. And it's all we've done. It's been our sole focus since 2004 from the inception of the company. While other players may dabble in DCIM or do it as a sideline, it is all we do. It is our passion. We have more people focused on this specific task than any other company in the world. And as a result, we are actually on the 9th generation of our technology. And we have literally, I mentioned below, over 300 customers who use us, and we have a 98% customer retention rate with those customers, which is unheard of really in the software industry. And our customers vary across a wide variety of industries, high-tech, financial sector, financial services company, healthcare companies, a wide range. But today we're going to be focusing on specifically the U.S. federal agency space. And we've listed some of our global partners there, folks who we tend to integrate with, ServiceNow, BMC, HP, IBM. But we have a wide range of partners who we either tie into their technologies or we work with them from a services perspective. So if you look out in the market, depending on what list you look at, you can see there might be 15 DCIM providers, depending on how you define it, up to 50 different DCIM providers, right? But what sets us apart is first, from a technology perspective, we have the most robust set of functionality in that 9th generation of our technology than any other DCIM provider. We support what we call the dock to decom process. From the very moment that assets roll into the back dock, we support the entire life cycle to when they're decommissioned, so dock to decom. Whether we're dealing with power or thermal issues or connecting the network or to power or capacity planning, migration services, consolidation, tech refresh, whatever the given processes or stages of assets, we support that functionality that's needed to manage that environment. We're FIPS and TLS 1.2 compliant and proven. Our solution is verified by a company called Veracode to make sure they've tested it for vulnerabilities, and any they find, we have to fix those issues. So we're the only DCIM provider that is Veracode verified. We have a very small deployment footprint and can handle hyperscale environments. We have this proven DCOI reporting capability, which supports the parent-child organization and reporting of information up from parents into child agencies, from child agencies up into the parent agencies. So we support that sort of secure way of communicating information within that structure. The platform itself is industry standard. We don't use proprietary protocols or proprietary API calls. It's all standard. One of the things people find extremely useful about our solution is often you already have data either in spreadsheets or in other types of proprietary systems. We can use what we call our bulk data load manager and take that information and easily leverage it as we deploy into the Nlyte solution. Highly scalable solution. We have some tech customers who have had us certify up to 150,000 racks with a single instance. So a highly scalable solution that performs well at scale. Of course, we have smaller clients who are managing far less racks. We support role-based and location-based access security. So you only see the information based on who you are and where you're located, so that you can control all that information and make sure that people can see and modify only the information that they're supposed to. And that's sort of the technology and the functionality at a high level. But one of the things that really sets Nlyte apart is the architecture. We have this modern web-based architecture that I mentioned, highly scalable. It's hardware agnostic. We're not a hardware vendor, so we don't have a particular hardware agenda we're trying to drive. So we support all hardware in a heterogeneous environment. And again, I mentioned the hyperscale within the lean design of the system. The solution uses web services throughout. So you can, in essence, access any part of the solution through those web services. We provide a variety of pre-built connectors to systems like ServiceNow and BMC and HP and a variety of others. But again, everything is open via these APIs. And so we expose all the functionality. If you need to tie into a homegrown data source or a homegrown application, you can easily do so. So these tend to be the main differentiators that not only help reduce the costs of deploying and maintaining the system, but they really enable you to get more value out of the system and tie it into other systems and allow other people to get that current information that is found within Nlyte. Now, I put in this particular slide because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes if people haven't seen a DCIM solution, it's just tough to get your arms around. And so I provide this because it gives you an idea of sort of what we do. And when people ask me, well, what does Nlyte Software do? We help people manage physical elements, right? Physical things in the data center, right? Or the processes around managing physical elements, racks, servers, cabling, power, cooling, and the workflows that go around that environment. So often when I show people screenshots, they begin to see, the different views that you're going to get in the software. And this makes it a little more material and people can get an idea of what we really mean when we're talking about managing physical infrastructure. And so that brings us to the Federal IT Modernization Act. And I'm gonna turn it over to Pete at this point. Pete, would you like to give comment on this slide?
Absolutely. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity. I think, or I know that, Mark, with that lead in, I felt you and feel you eloquently discussed not only Nlyte platform, but you used terms like agnostic and heterogeneous and web services, which, having spent 25 years in the federal government, I'll be wearing my CTO hat, my former CTO hat, if you will, what it was like in the government to evaluate market trends, to look at product solutions. And those three words you mentioned were very relevant. And for our listening audience, whether you're a seller to, on behalf of an OEM in the government or in the industry domain, or you're a federal employee learning a bit about or know a bit about DCIM and the DCOI effort, I think hopefully over the next few slides, you will draw or glean from this discussion amongst all of the legislation and laws and mandates out there, how maybe to differentiate a bit of what you're looking at. And I believe, Mark, again, great job wearing that hat of mine in terms of not pushing, but more importantly, differentiating value propositions. So with that, I'm going to stick to this slide, and there is obviously the diagram itself says a lot, and yet I won't be breaking down each and every bullet. But I think for those who are living inside the Beltway, I believe the folks inside the Beltway, federal IT modernization is white hot. It's a space that seems to come up from administration to administration, and obviously with the MGT Act working its way through Congress and the report to the President on federal IT modernization this past December, teamed with the Executive Order 13800, of course, the DCOI requirements baked within FITARA. There's a lot of information that needs to be digested before you go out and buy a product, before you buy a platform, which I believe is representative of the Nlyte framework. And I really, and I encourage those of you who buy and sell to the government to do that distilling of information. What I'm going to talk about, and we'll start off high level with federal IT modernization, and what's the goal? A lot of people point to, well, the government spends $90 billion a year, and they seem to do it every year, and of course, modernization is the theme. Yes, now cybersecurity gets baked into that theme. I personally like to break it down into threes. I think that it's about mitigating risk. And how do you do that while at the same time optimizing, creating resilience, and ultimately innovating is what will differentiate one agency from another. And ultimately, collectively, our country needs to do this type of activity. The MGT Act talks a lot about high level, and I think there's broad appeal to it in terms of addressing threats and talking about information security. No doubt those are significant, and whether you move to the cloud or whether you maintain some facility on site, investing in innovative platforms like Nlyte and those technologies, embracing the DCIM market, information management, data at your fingertips is what this webinar is really about. So if we can accept that federal IT modernization, the report to the President, which has two primary themes, network modernization and consolidation, and also shared services that could enable future network architectures, both within the government, but also among the government as those primary themes. Three sub-themes are really prioritizing those high value or high risk, high value assets. We'll talk a bit about having that 24/7 monitoring capability beyond just the metrics for DCIM. Modernizing the TIC and the National Cyber Protection System to improve protections, yes, remove barriers, and potentially enable cloud adoption is a sub-theme to the federal report on modernization. And then, of course, how can we look at consolidating our network acquisition and management initiatives? Those three themes underneath those two overarching themes are really what that report is about. And I would venture to say that Executive Order 13800, we mentioned briefly the MGT Act, but if we could focus on Executive Order 13800, you will find in this discussion, and Mark touched on this, is that has three tenets. One is the cybersecurity of our federal networks. Two, cybersecurity of critical infrastructure. And three, cybersecurity for the nation. The reason I wanted to mention that is cybersecurity is thrown around as a term that gives people the heebie-jeebies, or it's the sky is falling. This is more about innovating through cyber, using analytics or cyber analytics. Could be through the data center, could be through the monitoring capability that Mark has talked about and we'll reference a bit later. But if we take this theme of federal IT modernization out of the White House, on the Hill, the agency mandates, and there's plenty of information to digest, it's all about creating a platform for innovation while at the same time addressing cybersecurity risk mitigating that risk, and optimizing networks. We live in a world where digital transformation, another commonly used term inside the Beltway, is about, well, we use it a lot, but more importantly, it's about what are we doing? What's the roadmap? What's the plan? It's a tool like a DCIM platform that can help you create that roadmap, that 1, 3, 5-year horizon framework. And a tool like Nlyte, a tool that you may be using that is more hodgepodge, that needs to be augmented to have those metrics, not just to meet compliance, but to drive innovation is what this is all about. So I'm going to stop there because Mark and I are going to address a little more, should I say, distill down a bit more. But I hope that gives a high-level picture of what our listeners should be aware of from terminology, but also documentation, which is captured on that slide, of what you should be reading, again, whether you're buying or selling to and from the government. All yours, Mark.
Okay, Pete. So yeah, so in each of these given areas, again, we don't want to go through all the bullets. Again, if anybody has any questions, we're getting a few, please feel free to submit them. But as Pete said, as it relates to the different initiatives, I'm not going to go through all of this. DCIM really is about, for the federal government, is about monitoring and reporting, improving the specific DCOI metrics, right? And there are 5 specific given areas that are targeted. And again, it enables you to automate the processes around your physical infrastructure, right? Whether it has to do with power or servers or any of these given elements, with the goal of cost savings, greater accountability, and as Pete mentioned several times, really hardening your systems and hardening how you manage your physical systems, finding the elements that are not being managed within the data center. So again, not to go into all the different bullet points, but the key is that DCIM allows you to become really DCOI compliant. So there's some
Mark,
common,
Mark,
feel free.
Can I just, I just want to jump in a quick second. And again, for those of you listening, Mark hit on another pretty compelling term, or one that you should have in your vernacular when discussing with agencies, if you're, again, marketing your product. But in the case of Nlyte, automated infrastructure management is a term that really, when you break it down to Joe Sixpack speak, is let's have the machine, the network, be giving me information. Machines work 24/7. Federal agencies are being asked to use those analytics. The metrics Mark mentioned, which do speak to compliance, but address things like energy and power usage effectiveness and virtualization, and I think the other 2 are server utilization and facility utilization. Those metrics are being scorecarded. Our agencies are being asked to meet those 5 metrics. But Mark's point about smart meaning smart grid, smart cars, smart transportation, if you will. How can I have the information in an automated manner at my fingertips to make decisions? You have a choice if you're a federal agency: comply or comply and innovate. Nlyte, in this case, is saying, we have a platform that you have so much information, a plethora of it. How do you want it distilled? What information do you want to meet the mail on? And what information can help drive the modernization? So I just wanted to emphasize, Mark, some of that you said that might have been missed by our audience.
Okay. And the thing I like to point out to people, there's specific initiatives you're trying to hit. However, the value of a DCIM solution is going to go long beyond that, right? It's going to make your job easier. It's going to help reduce costs in the future. We're constantly improving the software to provide more value. But additionally, choosing a system that's open and allows you to connect other systems, what you'll find is you can improve the value of your other systems, whether that's your ITSM systems or other IT operational systems, by providing accurate information within the software. The gist of it is, it's just too hard to keep track of things if you're using spreadsheets, right? So by tying into a BMS system, tying into ITSM and other IT operation systems, you really increase the overall value, not just to hit those 5 specific points you're going after with DCOI, but long after you've met those particular goals. So again, and Pete, feel free to jump in here. It's great to have the sort of interactive element of this.
Sure.
Again, there are very common Nlyte federal use cases, right? There's obviously a focus on creating a secure DCOI solution, one that will enable you to hit, again, the 5 main parts of the DCOI initiative. But as Pete mentioned, there's digital transformation, there's modernization. Sorry, I'm getting tongue twisted on that one. But the gist is you can really, using software, it can help you figure out how to modernize your environment. What needs to be modernized? What assets do you have? What assets are not under management, right? And you just can't do that with spreadsheets. When you begin to do this, you can find the areas where you can get cost reductions in overhead, in maintenance and support, and so forth. Additionally, there are operational efficiencies you get by saving time, reducing manual verifications, reducing power costs, and so forth. And when all this information is accurate, consistent, people can do their jobs faster. They can be more agile to requests coming in. There's nothing worse than being on a data center floor and you go out to make a change to an asset and the asset where it's supposed to be, or it wasn't the asset you were planning for it to be. And again, this idea of improved asset integrity by seeing what changes are happening at the physical layer. If people are moving assets, if they're adding assets, if there are changes, if you're introducing firmware that isn't supposed to be there, being able to see everything that's going on with your physical elements. Pete, I thought I heard you there. Did you want to jump in on these use cases at all?
Yeah, I did. And again, I'm wearing the federal hat here. That having worked midway through my career at the Department of Education, running a data center when there were no DCIM tools, but we had a bit of the hodgepodge. Well, maybe it was transformative back in the day, but lots of monitors and individual people looking at individual screens without falling asleep or pecking corn, and then providing consolidated reports that really put us in a very reactive mode. Now, this was in the late 90s, so at the time it was innovative, but we needed information because of the oncoming cybersecurity issues that now we experience in our public, private, and consumer lives with protecting personal identifiable information. But to Mark's point, those of you listening, yeah, there are some use cases here that high level touch the 3 areas that most people who, again, sell to or work within the federal government, civilian intel, and DoD. While each of these domains or each of these various ecosystems are unique, they have the same needs, whether it's in a classified or an unclassified environment. Consolidating data centers, managing and reporting information, investing in a DCIM tool like Nlyte. It's all something that should be, and most likely and hopefully is, front and center. Again, not to address simply a compliance exercise, but if you think about as an agency, and if you're an agency listening, technology is never the problem, right? We all know that. Digital transformation is accepting the world that we're moving to. Cloud integration, cloud migration. Even if you're maintaining your own data center, you don't plan to move to the cloud. How can you be very prescriptive and predictive in what could happen? We live in a time in government, and I say this from experience, of reacting. Bad stuff happens, breaches occur, we report upstream, when it sure would be nice to know ahead of time, or as much as we can ahead of the time. A zero-day attack, for example. How can we have identify what could happen? We've seen this happen in data centers across our country, infrastructure during incidents that are acts of God, Katrina, Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, forgive me, Deepwater Horizon, Fukushima. These events happened, and in many cases, maybe we could have predicted or not, but learning from these incidents, learning from a breach like at OPM, enhancing cybersecurity resilience, each of these agencies, unique to their specific domain, will rely on technology to meet their mission. So I don't want to over sell that idea, but every agency has a unique mission in government. We did at the Department of Energy. It was a very diverse agency. We have reason to, or had reason to, invest in DCIM types of platforms for the 30 missions plus that represent that agency. So this isn't about you're a silver bullet or a one-stop shop when you're doing your analysis, doing your trending. But this slide hopefully talks about the scalability of Nlyte, and more importantly, about it can be retrofitted to multiple environments.
Great. And I down below, we have three sort of anonymized case studies of specific agencies who are using our solution. The themes you'll find throughout all of them is just the ability to consolidate data centers, greater insight into the information that's occurring inside those data centers, integration into other systems, and the opportunities you get from these case studies. At the end of this presentation, we'll give you a link where you can actually go read specific use cases on our website of federal agencies who are using Nlyte today. So we're starting to get pushed for time, so we'll just keep going here. Pete, did you want to discuss this particular slide?
I think this is just a summation for those of you who have heard us talk already about you have a decision to make as an agency. Check the box, do the average, comply. Clearly, it's a what's in it for you question that Mark and I were talking about as we prepared this address. Innovation is a step further. Innovation is saying, I'm going to meet the mail and then I'm going to try to do more so I could put my agency maybe in a position that could be the beacon for the federal government or do something so I have more actionable intelligence that I can apply. The differentiator between actionable and apply is having the information then doing something with it. These are questions. These are, on this slide, I feel, just something to think about when you're debating. Maybe you don't have the resources and you can only comply, but we're really trying and asking, use the power of a platform like Nlyte to do more than just meet the mail.
Excellent point, Pete. So things to look for. So there's sort of two sides of this equation. If you're looking to deploy DCIM to become DCLI compliant, there's sort of the technology side and there's sort of the evaluation deployment side. From the technology side, of course, you want a solution that supports the entire set of DCLI functions, right? So you want takes care of all those functional areas. But again, you can increase the value of the system by integrating it into other systems, tying it into ITSM, tying it into your BMS system, tying it in perhaps to your system so you can actually see the workloads running on the physical level. So again, see what sort of integration capabilities a vendor provides. You want it to be security tested, right? You want a company like Veracode to verify that the system doesn't have known issues and has been tested for those particular vulnerabilities. You want something that's easy to use because ultimately you want people to adopt joy using the tool. So ease of use becomes a big paramount issue when evaluating the technology. And I think, of course, everybody on this call probably understands from a U.S. federal perspective, you want an organization that's been successful with other U.S. federal agencies, right? That has a track record of being successful, of working with the U.S. federal agency, of getting them up and running and ensuring they're successful. And so I think when you're looking at a technology solution, you should look at these key areas that are important in ensuring the success of your deployment. Pete, did you want to take the other side?
Absolutely. And again, this is a very agnostic approach to if I'm the agency doing my evaluation and I'm looking at the DCIM market and I'm reading every Forrester Gartner report out there and deciding, well, who do I want to have a bake-off with? Number one, there is no apple to apple. Every platform in my book needs to be evaluated on its own merit and should have capabilities aligned to mission. So number one, align the platform. In this case, we're talking about Nlyte, its capabilities with your tech roadmap. If you have one in the agency, great. If you don't, it's time to have one developed. Because how do you know what you're building to and how can you leverage that platform? Think about Microsoft Word, think about the Microsoft Office, think about Google. Do you use all the capability in those applications? No, but they're there. In this case, if you're looking at a tool like Nlyte and you're mapping it to your requirements and those metrics, great. Boy, would it be nice to know what mission or what should I say capabilities in the mission at the Department of X do we want to meet? And oh, wow, it would be really enlightening to know that Nlyte could meet that. And that, again, speaks to IT infrastructure optimization and doing your assessment. That's on the agencies to be doing that, okay? Vendors do not develop roadmaps for you. You need to have a roadmap to your due diligence and and take advantage of the opportunity of a platform like Nlyte. Your data sets, goes without saying, high value assets, high risk, high value assets. That's emphasized across all the legislation we discussed earlier. Where's your data? Who owns it? What's the integrity? And again, you want an application that just pulls the garbage in and pumps the garbage out, or do you want an application that's going to make sense of that data through machine learning, artificial intelligence, things of that nature, so that you can have informed decision making and, again, having actionable intelligence to apply? 3, your application agency footprint, or rationalizing your agency application footprint. For those of you not in the IT world, we use that term to mean what software and hardware do you have in your backyard? Okay, rationalizing applications is no fun, but it's something that needs to be done for all kinds of reasons. But the goal here is, if you're going to invest in an Nlyte platform, then you want it to complement those investments. It's not a rip and replace. Again, this is an augmentation opportunity for you, an agency, to have the information to meet compliance and to do some really exciting, innovative work. Stakeholders, goes without saying, you want to have stakeholder user groups to be taking advantage of this, not just the office of the CIO. So engage those stakeholders. I know that's what's happening in the use cases that Nlyte shared on the prior slide. The insights from a mission entity cannot be underscored enough. The CIO office sometimes is dubbed the keep the lights on group, but the people who do the mission at the Department of X, and we'll use energy as an example since it was my last stop during my government time, we had about 30 plus agencies at a unique mission within the agency itself. Those insights and opportunities to pilot with them with a tool like an Nlyte, that's something you want to be doing, whether you're suggesting on behalf of the OEM space or you're the agency and you're looking to invest. And lastly, constantly keep those stakeholders informed. Companies like Nlyte are not going to not want to keep telling you, but at a minimum, have them come in once a quarter and tell you what the platform's doing, how it's robust, what it's scaling to, the great features it has, and take the information, you federal employees, and share that with your community. That way you're going to get most out of that investment.
Okay, great.
Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Pete. Oh, absolutely. Well, we're going to jump right into questions. We're sort of over time, so I'll take 2 questions here. Again, we will get back to everyone with any of the questions you have, so feel free to submit questions, but I think we're going to only have time for 2. So the first one I'm going to give right to you, Pete, is I've wanted a decent solution for a while. This comes from Mike. What's the best way to justify the expenditure? It sounds like he's having challenges justifying the expense.
Sure. Well, here's what I would do. And again, wearing my hat, my CTO hat, I was blamed. I was that guy that was always looking to push the envelope and make a business or use case to invest in technology. One of the best things you can do to make that case is, if you don't have a platform today that can provide you the metrics, the analytics, if you will, yes, to meet compliance on behalf of an OMB mandate, but more importantly, maybe that investment you have is end of life. Maybe the software is no longer being developed. Look at what you have, look at its genealogy, its lineage, and that's one of the strongest use cases that I would make. If a product is in its prime and it's constantly developing and so forth, great. But the way to complement an existing investment that could be toward that end of life status or no longer really being supported, that's a great case to make without pushing a tool being the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Okay. And this last question comes from Sam. We have a ton of legacy infrastructure equipment that needs retrofitting. How does DCIM help with this? I'll let you give comment. Go for it, Pete.
Well, yeah, I'll just jump in really quick, and then I think, Mark, you did a really great job earlier. I look at this as complementing existing investment, knowing the capability of a tool like Nlyte, and then being able to marry it up with what you're currently getting out of that architecture today. Nlyte and its ability to be those 3 areas that Mark mentioned earlier: web services, agnostic, modernized infrastructure. That right there sets up a platform like Nlyte to retrofit nicely and potentially augment the capability of that existing investment.
Yeah, and I think this was specific about equipment that needs retrofitting. As I sort of mentioned before, one of the strengths of Nlyte's functionality is supporting the entire doc to decom process, right? We've had, and as well, migrations, consolidation. So we have organizations who use the technology to first identify where are all the assets, what are those assets. We also, through discovery, can find assets that perhaps you don't even know about that are unmanaged. Then once you have that mapped, the technology allows you to easily plan out what sort of tech refresh you want to do in terms of retrofitting old assets to new assets and taking you through that process step by step. And the nice thing about it is it just isn't done at a high level. You tell it what you want to do, and then the software figures out where assets should go, creates a punch down list of what processes need to be done, what particular tasks need to be done by individuals to accomplish that in order to optimize power usage, maximize usage of space, and so forth. So again, it's allowing the software to do the heavy lifting and figuring all these things out based on what your requirements are. So really, that's sort of a bread and butter thing for Nlyte to do. So I'm sorry we went over time by a bit on our webinar here. Again, we didn't get to all the questions. I'm sorry about that. But we are going to be sending out a link to this particular webinar. So if you want to look again, feel free. We'll be sending out that email. Second, for all the folks that we didn't answer your question, we will get to you offline and get you an answer to your question. So first, I want to thank you, Pete, for participating in today's webinar.
You bet. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for the time you spent with us during the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you.